This is the Night Shift Podcast, powered by Black and Gold Banneret, your home for news and analysis from all UCF night sports. The Night Shift starts now. And we welcome you to this special edition of Night Shift, episode number 501. Eric Lopez here alongside Bryson Turner. Coming up, it is All-Star break in baseball, Major League Baseball, and it would be fitting in this episode, me and Don Struble, you're going to hear an interview that we both did with Emily Mottola, who could make the case she is the greatest volleyball setter in UCF volleyball history. She's also married to UCF Athletic Hall of Famer and current Tampa Bay Rays hitting coach Chad Mottola. You'll hear that interview on this episode. Then later, me and Bryson's going to break down the UCF baseball players that got drafted this week in the MLB draft and what that means for UCF baseball in 2026, as we'll also give a quick early look on the outlook for baseball and the softball roster for 2026 as softball's made some additions at the transfer portal. That's all coming up on this edition of Night Shift. Of course, check us out on all the social media platforms. You can check out blackandgoldbanneret.com. It's been a busy week at blackandgoldbanneret.com, hasn't it, Bryson?
It sure has. We have the bannings coming out. We're getting to the last few releases of the nomination articles. We have the all-quarter century team, which you heard about last episode, and episode number 500, Eric Lopez.
How's it feel to get the quarter century football team, yeah.
How does it feel to get to 500 episodes, Eric?
It's, yes, it feels very, I can't believe it's been 500. I'll leave it as that. A lot of fun there. So we'll get into all of that stuff and much more. Should be a fun episode. All right, let's take you now. Last week, me and Don Struble had a chance to catch up with Emily Mottola, who is the wife of Chad Mottola, but of course, a fantastic volleyball player, which me and Bryson will discuss on the back end of this interview. If you been a subscriber, listener to the podcast a few weeks back, you would have heard me and Don Struble's interview with Chad Mottola. We actually interviewed Chad Mottola a couple of weeks ago in the Rays clubhouse, which is probably one of the coolest settings we've ever done in the history of Night Shift, Bryson, to do an interview right inside of a Major League Baseball clubhouse, which is what we did with Chad Mottola. That was awesome. So that's in our archives on the podcast feeds, as well as in our YouTube channel, on as far as Night Shift is concerned, and of course, all that. So
be sure to subscribe to the Night Shift YouTube channel for all
please
of that
do. Subscribe, give us a thumbs up, give us some 5-star reviews, by the way, on the podcast feed. That doesn't hurt. That helps. Trust me, it helps more than you think. But so this time now we got a chance to talk to Emily Mottola, who, while many may know her as the wife of Chad Mottola, some of you may not know that she is among the greatest UCF volleyball players of all times. We'll get to her volleyball career in this interview. We'll talk about how she ended up at UCF, a 1-2 punch that she played with in the 90s at UCF volleyball we discussed, as well as obviously married to Chad Mottola, and of course her son Luke Mottola, who is on the baseball team redshirted this past year, and a daughter who's also a setter that's going to be playing at a Division I college volleyball program, which you'll hear about in the near future. Here now, Emily Mottola on Night Shift. All right, joining us now, she is the all-time leader at UCF volleyball in assists. She is one of the greats in UCF volleyball. Of course, she's also has done it all at UCF, including being a mom to Luke Mottola, who is now a baseball player at UCF, and of course the wife of Chad Mottola, the Tampa Bay Rays hitting coach and UCF Athletic Hall of Famer. I speak of Emily Mottola joining us here. That's a lot of titles. You got a lot of unique titles.
I'm surprised that some of them are still standing, but thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about you and just kind of what's it been like to be, on the one hand, you have a daughter who plays volleyball like you did as a setter. You've got a son who's playing baseball at UCF, the same school you went to, And then obviously your husband is the hitting coach for the Tampa Bay Rays, who is a UCF Hall of Famer. And you're kind of the glue of all this, as Chad told me and Don when we talked to him at the Rays clubhouse, that you're the glue person to kind of make this all work. So just kind of describe all that.
Yeah, it's all we've ever known, having dated since college days and a husband that travels a lot, you kind of are at home and kind of running the show with the kids. So we're just happy they both fell in love with, the sports that we loved. We would have been happy with them doing anything they chose, but they're both having, just remarkable careers, and we're just happy for the opportunities that they've been given, really.
As a parent, do you kind of let the son and the daughter pick what they want to do? Do you just see it early on in them? Because obviously there's a big athletic family background there. So I'm just curious how that all develops as Luke decides, hey, I want to be a baseball player. He was certainly an athlete, played a lot of other sports, but he decided on baseball. And then your daughter literally playing volleyball, literally playing the same position as you as a setter as she gets ready to go to college.
Yeah, no pressure to do either one, really. We wanted them to definitely blaze their own trail. So they both went to Catholic grade school, and the fun part of that about that is they do offer every sport. So they played everything, from elementary school all the way up into high school. Luke did football, basketball, and baseball, and we were really not sure which direction he wanted to head until it was more toward the end of high school, and then some opportunities opened up, and he jumped on them. My daughter, I tried to make her a tennis player, but she didn't love it. And she'll tell you that. She, was just kind of the gym rat. I was coaching Luke's middle school volleyball team, and another coach noticed her peppering against the wall and said, "Hey, can she come play for my team?" She was probably 9 or 10 years old, and her eyes just lit up, and we've never looked back since. So she is in love with it, and it's just fun to see her play the sport that I love and the position that I love. It makes for some good conversation in the car, little back to school special all the time, as far as just talking about the game. And it just as far as a player, she knows more than I ever knew at this age, and is way better than I ever was. So it's really fun.
Go ahead, Don.
Emily, so I was wondering, we're in a couple, like you and Chad come from a different era of college sports where the transfer portal, those things weren't as rampant and crazy. Like, kids these days have all these different options. How much does it mean to you guys to kind of have Luke continue the legacy of your family and decide to go to UCF and play for the same team that his dad did when he could have went maybe anywhere else?
Well, his opportunities weren't like a lot. So we're thankful to Rich for giving him that opportunity to play, and just seeing, I guess, the athlete in him and the potential and upside that he does have. So it really, I mean, it hit hard for us. We were very excited. There's nothing like seeing your kid follow in your own path. And our love for UCF, is thick. We still do a lot of stuff out at UCF, and all of our good friends are from those days. So it's holds a very special place in our heart. We're excited for him.
Yeah, and I mean, what can be said about just not only the ties that you guys have to UCF, but Florida in general? I mean, I know that Chad had been all over for his career and then comes back, spends the last decade or so with the Rays. I mean, what does this state and the Orlando community mean to you guys?
We've always kept a home base in Orlando. So since both of us, went to UCF early on, it's always it's always been home. There were many times and many different scenarios where we were wondering if we should maybe move the kids, and especially, when the COVID year hit and Luke was heading into high school, that would have been the year to move over to St. Pete, Orlando, or Tampa area. But the kids were dead set against that. They wanted to remain here with their friends, and, we fully supported that. So Orlando, Florida in general, we couldn't be luckier that he's with the Rays. The organization, top to bottom, is amazing. Some of our greatest friends, are on that team, and the coaching staff as well. So it's, we say it's as like he's as close as he can be, but it's like the longest, shortest drive there is in Florida. if that makes any sense. So it's easy, but not easy.
Yeah, I know that when we talked to Chad, he said that despite a rough season for UCF baseball and Luke not really getting any playing time, he's keeping a really positive attitude, very calm outlook. What is it about the program that draws not only him but you guys? And what do you see his future looking like in the short term with the team, from a mother's perspective?
We're just taking it honestly day by day. He got the opportunity to go up to Lima, Ohio this summer and play summer ball. So they're playing 6 out of 7 days a week and traveling all around the Great Lakes. So I think that's a really special experience. And we're just, trying, keep your head down, keep working hard, and just keep enjoying each day, truly. And hopefully that, in the fall at UCF, he'll have finally played in some games, because there's nothing like, actually playing in games. He didn't get that opportunity his freshman year, and that was totally understandable. So we just, take it a day at a time, a week at a time, and he's loving his season up there. He's got one other freshman teammate that he's with, and it's really great because they've met kids from all over. So he's got a bunch of new buddies, and Chad and I are actually heading up there next week for a couple days during the All-Star break to finally go see him play. So we're excited.
Awesome. Yeah. And with your daughter kind of carving her own path and choosing a Big 12 rival to play for, is there any friendly banter there? Do you guys like
Oh,
joke around and
yeah.
stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. But I'll have to cheer for ASU, sadly, when when those days come. She's going to graduate early in December and head out to Tempe in January. So it's a really awesome opportunity with a new coaching staff that's only been there a couple years, and she just connected and clicked with all of them, and it really made the most sense for her to be out there. So she couldn't be more excited.
Kind of crazy that we're saying UCF and Arizona State conference rivals. I don't think that was not even in the radar when you played there. I mean, that's
Oh,
kind of unique.
Oh, it's beyond unique. Yeah, the travel that they have to do now is unbelievable. And, we always say, like, I never even played 25-point volleyball, I think. So I don't even know. We always say, do they even have like our, the records back when we played? It was like in the old filing cabinets that got, kicked out the back door when they when they moved the buildings. But yeah, the game's changed, everything's changed. So yeah, the travel will be fun, but I'm just thankful that one has a fall season and that one has a spring season, and I'm not, they're not bumping up against each other.
What got you to go to UCF as a volleyball player?
Back in the day, the recruiting process, obviously everything was different. So I sent my VHS tape out to multiple schools, and my dad had attended Florida State, so that is where I initially had wanted to go. But UCF came back with the most interest, the best offer, and it was it was the up and coming school, and I knew someday it would be the FSU and UF, and sure enough, that it's that and more now. So I took that opportunity, and it's been amazing. It's just funny to think back on, like, submitting the VHS tapes and that sort of stuff. But
I have a VHS still, so I'm with you, all right? So I'm still one of the last few that Don right now is just looking at us like, what are you guys doing?
Oh, man.
What are we talking about? But like you had an incredible time. You played for Laura Smith, and you got to play with, among others, Miriam Metzkes. And it was interesting because I got to call UCF volleyball in like 2022, which was McKenna Melville's senior year, and Amber Olson was her setter, and they were tight. They were kind of in sync. And I remember because Amber was moving up a lot of the stats for setters. That's kind of, in a weird way, how I got to know you, because you were all over the record book. And my thought reaction was, like, who is this person? And number two, why is she not in the Hall of Fame? Which is a whole other story. But you all had that great run in the 90s where you dominated what was called the TAC, and now it's the ASUN Conference there. Describe that era, playing for Laura Smith and playing for the talented players that you did, like a Miriam Metzkes.
Miriam, there's no one like Miriam. She's still one of my best friends to this day. She was a phenomenal volleyball player, and you said it perfect. It was just kind of one of those teammates where it's an unspoken language on the court. Her, Renata Menchikova, I mean, the list goes on and on. We could get on the phone tomorrow and have probably almost our entire starting lineup here next weekend. Like, that's how close the girls on this team still are. So, I had a roommate, Amy, from Colorado. There was, we had Lori and Emily. Michelle Cutright's another one who has a, UCF baseball connection as well. Annabelle and Maribel Marcos from South Florida. So like I said, and Tyra was also from our hometown in Fort Myers, Florida. And then, the most special experience of it all was playing, with my sister. So I got 2 years with my sister, and my parents, it was just a really fun time for them.
Well, I didn't know that part. So your sister played on that UCF. What position did she play?
She was a right side, like back row specialist, lefty right side player. Yeah. Susie Moore now, Susie Quiser.
Oh, wow. I didn't. That's a cool
Yeah.
stat. That's funny. And obviously, you were there 4 straight conference championships while you were there. It was part of that 6-year run, 6 straight championships there. In fact, 95. We're at the 30-year anniversary of that 95 team. That was your last year.
Yeah.
How has the sport changed? Because now you have a different perspective. You're a mother of a volleyball player, so you've seen it. Your daughter's making headlines in the newspapers when like club ball is winning the state, championships and all that stuff that goes on during the summer and things like that. How has the sport changed from when you were a player to now being a mom and being around your daughter and seeing the sport?
Well, just the game overall has changed completely. We laugh when we say, we played real volleyball where you had to earn your points, and those 15-point matches, and there was no rally scoring, there was no libero. So yeah, a ton in that aspect has changed, but the same, I guess the same camaraderie and the same, just the fire and intensity, and just watching her play now, I still feel it's like you're almost back on the court with your teammates from back in the day. Like I can see the joy and just the true friendship and the love for one another, which has truly, is why her current team has done so well. And they had so much success this year. It was one for the record books. They just won AAUs 2 weeks ago, and she got MVP. It couldn't have written itself a better script. So just proud of her and her team, because obviously this is a sport where you rely on team. You can't do it by yourself. And if you don't have that great group of girls surrounding you, that you're not going to get it done. Like, that's the most important part.
How much do the kids, did they growing up ask you about your playing career, or Chad ask him about his playing career?
Chad's always the highlight, so I just kind of stand back and remind them that they might have gotten a little bit of athletic ability from me, but no, it's all about Dad, and he has the big fancy career, but it really, neither of us cared so much. It was just more about what the kids are doing and what they're accomplishing, and really not about us. When the kids are growing up, we don't ever want that pressure to live up to what either one of us did, because we just want them to be them, really.
All right. Well, I'm going to brag on your behalf. You're still as we talk today, you're still the program's all-time leader in games played, 156, assists, 5,923. 3 of your 4 seasons ranks in the single season assist record. You rank second in career aces, over 201 aces. You're 4th in aces per set. You're 7th in digs, 1,155. That's pretty good. That's a good resume there, playing career there.
I like it. Yeah, it sounds good. It is. It's. I'm surprised by it. And like you said, the great players that have come after us, like the Amber and the McKenna, connection. And my daughter enjoyed she was a young girl, and those were her role models, at UCF growing up, and she would stand in line for their autographs. Jordan Pingle, who is a defensive specialist at UCF, ended up coaching her, and I have pictures of Elle standing there getting, volleyballs autographed from her. So it's just, there's been so many great players since my time, and we just enjoy it year after year.
You and Renata were the first pro players, by the way, to be selected all region, AVCA all region from UCF. You're
Yeah.
also an ASUN Player of the Year and a tournament MVP, which for a setter is not easy to accomplish. Usually those outside hitters get the benefit of the doubt in those type of awards. So is there any of those accolades I just referenced? Is there one in particular that you're the most proud of?
I mean, I think being a player of the year for the conference, because, that's a vote that you're getting from all the coaches within the conference. And obviously that all region team, I'm not sure exactly what they called that back in the day that Renata and I were both a part of. I think Tyra was as well, but yeah, those were special. I didn't, at the time it felt just like kind of almost part of the process, but Renata, Tyra, Miriam, like just special, special players, special teammates, and we couldn't have done it without each other. I still run in the last game I was at. Renata was there with her daughter, and our girls got to meet. So it's those kind of little things that just remind us how special of a time we had together.
Does any memories flash back? As you know, I saw you in the fall when obviously Luke was playing fall ball, and you and Chad
Right.
were there, and your daughter were there to watch him play. When you come to campus, do you have this? It's unique because Chad even mentioned it. The campus is so completely different now that it feels like a different school. So how do you feel when every time you come on campus? Do you have any memories pop up, or is it such a different campus that it's almost like a different school? How do you feel every time you come on campus?
No, there's a ton of memories. And it's funny because the kids are like, "Yeah, we know you've told us," or we'll drive, we'll drive by CVI, and I'm like, "That's where we used to live," and we'd explain to them how the girl athletes were on the inside and the guys were on the outside, and there was no parking garages on campus. I think they hear the same story every time we go onto campus about all the different spots. But yeah, the memories are great. Even like some full circle moments where when Chad threw out the first pitch a couple games into the season this year, and we had some video of Luke throwing out the first pitch when he was maybe, oh gosh, 2 years old. So, that kind of like was a moment of pause for me and just reflection on how lucky we are to have had this for so long. And yeah, every time, we're still out there all the time. I was just looking at football tickets today. So, and renewed my volleyball tickets. So all is good. But yeah, we love it out there. Even with everything that's new, I still feel like there's enough of the old that it feels like home.
I feel like everybody that's gone to UCF, Don's currently a student there. I feel like
Okay.
everybody has garage stories. I feel like we've
Good.
all
Yeah.
had that story, right? Don, am I right on this?
Oh yeah, it's when I first started there, spring of 24, I was like, wow, it's so easy to park here. And then fall semester came and I'm like, there's nowhere to park. So I don't know if there's like an influx, but yeah, it feels like the student body's growing every year. I know it's close to 80,000, which obviously substantially bigger in any way, Emily, is that I know there's so many good memories, but is it kind of intimidating almost to see how much the school has grown and like how rapidly it's ascending in certain ways?
No, I think it's great. Really.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that big school feel to us, like just because we have our groups and we have our friends, and so there's a sense of smallness there. But yeah, coming on campus, I mean, parking's still difficult, during sporting events and that kind of thing. And back in the day, you could just pull up to the dirt lot at the old Wade bench, and the baseball stadium's right there. So those kind of things have changed, but all for the better. Keep growing, keep getting better, keep getting bigger. It's great.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what can you say about Luke's work ethic and his drive to do the best he can and like his love for the game? Would you say like how much of that does he get from his dad? How much of it is his own personality? Just kind of describe like who he is as a player.
I mean, Chad would probably be able to describe it better because they have, their daily talks, and, I can only speak so much baseball, I guess it is. But so I try and offer, other areas, like, and not talk about the game all the time. So he's a hard worker. He was a great student in high school. He still is in college. So I always tell him, like, at the end of the day, the mathlete is my favorite athlete. And even if baseball for some day wasn't there, he has, other opportunities and avenues that he can go down. But yes, he's very determined. Him and Chad, are texting at length, during games, after games, into the evenings, and there's a lot of conversation. And it's hard though too, because it's almost like the shoemaker's kid, he's not around to like, we're finally getting to go see Luke next week. But it's hard not being there for him more often because of Chad's schedule and having to be on the road so much. So we're just here as, support. But yeah, the work ethic's there, the love of the game is there. I think he couldn't, having the teammates and that group that you get that comes with playing a sport in college, I think that really is the most special part.
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned in the beginning of this conversation, Chad, he said that you were the glue that kind of keeps it all together. How important is that in a family of athletes, especially when one is constantly dealing with the daunting and grueling schedule that the MLB produces? I mean, he's on the road, a bunch throughout the year. And like, how important is it to just continue to have that family camaraderie and that stability at home to not only make your kids better athletes, but just better people?
Yeah, it's everything. And like I said, it's all we've ever known. So it works for us, but it's not easy. It can be a lot of fun at times, but it's hard. He's gone 8 months out of the year, and obviously he does come home on off days, but a lot of times some of those off days they're flying in from the West Coast and getting in at anywhere between 3 and 5 in the morning. And then the next day is your off day. Really, you've got to kind of sleep and that's about it. So, sorry, I have another, okay, call coming in. Are you guys still there?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, we make it work, and, the priority is the kids. And if he has an off day and can be home, he's here and he's going to events and trying to attend everything we can. So as much as it would be nice even next week to have 4 days of the All-Star break at home, we're jumping on a flight early to get up to Ohio to watch Luke play. So, that all those things with the kids are our priority. And then, the travel volleyball season can be as grueling as the MLB season, I feel like. So traveling with her is, it's been nothing but fun, but a big, a big commitment all year.
Eric,
How
do
do
you
you,
have any?
how do you balance the being a mom? You mentioned it, like Luke talks to his dad about baseball. So you're probably playing more of the mom being supportive role. But at the
Yes.
same time, you were an athlete yourself. You were a great volleyball player. So there's probably some thoughts in your mind as when you, for example, watch your daughter play volleyball, you might want to offer some insights. But then there's that, well, but at the same time, I got to be a mom. How do you balance that being the athlete, offer her, help her, but at the same time, not just be like, hey, this is how I did it. I'm just going to be a supportive mom.
Yeah, that's tricky. It's really tricky. And I was lucky enough to be given the opportunity to coach. Well, I coached both of them in middle school. But then her club team at Winter Park Volleyball Club, I was able to coach from like 10s to 14s, I think it was. So that was really fun but by the time she was ready to go to high school, I knew that I was already going to step away because they need that new voice. They need someone else. But um, sometimes she's receptive to comments, but I'm really careful with my timing. We'll wait, not the day of sometimes. Maybe it's a couple of days down the road after a tournament, or I'll be like, hey, what'd you think about this? Or what'd you think about that? Or why did you do this? Um, and I can tell if she wants to talk about it at the moment or not. So I'm just kind of careful, but I really just enjoy being the parent and the cheerleader now more than anything else. And like I said, she's way better than I ever was. So she's actually teaching me some things.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
How did you and Chad meet?
When you're an athlete, like that's your group. So like the volleyball team and the baseball team hung out together and eventually just kind of all meet each other. And there's no fraternities, sororities. You're just hanging out with the athletes, going to study hall, eating together, living together. And that's how we met.
So was he still at UCF playing baseball, or he had just gone on to play professionally?
He had just gotten drafted and like came back and then still stayed with all his buddies at UCF because technically he was only in his junior season. So we met his first, like a couple months after he got drafted when he got back.
Because he told us that you knew what you were signing up for because he was going to play professionally. What I mean, obviously you fall in love and everything like that, but you knew that this was not going to be an easy relationship. I mean, he was upfront with you about it, but you always were supportive. Where did that come from? And being so supportive through his journey, from his playing careers, playing through the minors, then getting into coaching, that's a lot to take. But you've been able, like I said, you've been there every step of the way. What has that journey been like to follow him as he's followed his career here to now being with the success he's had?
Yeah, it's been great. Early on, I was a high school teacher myself, really across the street from UCF, a university high. So that schedule worked great. I could have the summers off to go travel wherever. We lived in many different minor league cities. The majority of his career was in the minor leagues. So, again, not as glamorous as it may seem, but it was fun. And then once we had the kids, the early years are actually easier, just grabbing them and going and spending the summers in a different city. So they got some really unique opportunities, and it was great. Like I didn't mind it at all. And then it honestly really gets harder as the kids get older and they have more things going on. And then you can't make as many road trips or get over to see them. I think that's when the challenges, got harder. And then Chad was missing some big events or big games or things like that. So we're like, this doesn't feel great. But at least one of us was there. We have amazing grandparents that are in town that are at everything. So that really helps.
I bet it does. He said that you being an athlete, you both being athletes, helped, that you understood where he's coming from. How big of a help is that as he was going through his career, and how big of a help is that for you being as a mom now, having two kids who are athletes themselves, and you can relate to what they're going through?
Yeah, it's a kind of a competitive nature, and just, pushing them to compete, and pushing them to kind of get out of their comfort zone in certain things. So just knowing what they're talking about, and being able to just to have a conversation with them is on their level, as far as, like you said, being that athlete is. And it's being relatable, I guess, more than anything.
Who's the most competitive of the family right now?
Oh, I mean, I'd like to say me, but
Give me what there's. I know with all of you, with all the accolades and the athletic, being athletes, there's got to be something as a family that y'all get really competitive about on your spare time. What is that? Is it like a board game? Could be whatever. There's got to be something. It could be like, I could envision like your son and daughter maybe growing up racing to the car just to see who gets first. Like, give me what's something that triggers the competitive side of the Mottola family?
No board games or things like that. I think the one that's the funnier one is maybe like a fantasy football leagues or things like that. Like in my daughter questioning, a lot of what my husband was doing, and he needs to start listening to her. So I stay out of that world. That is not an area of interest for me. But the three of them, it's amazing, the conversations that go down over things like that. So as far as the kids, I always told Elle she has an amazing older brother. He was just like the super nice. They're like brother and sister. You push each other and do whatever. But overall, Luke could not have been a nicer big brother for her. So she's lucky.
Okay, very good. I know, Chad, you mentioned it even earlier, and Chad's mentioned it. You both go. You all go to football games at least a couple times a year when you can.
Yeah.
I know you've been back to the venue. You've been obviously at John Giuliano Park. What jumps out at you? What's it been like seeing UCF sporting events at those venues that didn't exist when you played? Like, I think Don would be kind of freaked out if you told him where you actually played your home matches.
I know it, Don, in the education building.
There you go.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was, the little round window doors on, our coach would kind of peek through the doors to check on us during practice. And then we did eventually move over to the new arena, which is now the volleyball arena. Right when, I think maybe junior or senior year, I'm trying to think of the timing exactly. So I was even laughing to myself this morning. I was thinking back about, working out. We all worked out in the same weight room with the football players and everything. And I remember going onto campus one day to work out, and I walked in and like Coach Kruzek was in there, and he was the only one lifting and throwing weight around, and I kind of looked around, it was just me and him, and I'm like, I like this, I was like, this almost scares me, I need to get out of here. It was just funny. But you know, it was just like very special moments. And you know, Wayne Dench, it almost felt like two portables back in the day, you know, over there in front of that baseball stadium. And now, you know, just the facilities, the amenities that the kids have, moving my son into the towers, you know, last fall, like very surreal. And how special to be, you know, 10 steps away from the baseball field, and, you know, Garvey right down the way. So what they have now is really, really neat. And we remind them and tell them all the time how lucky they are.
I was gonna say, do you and Chad, like, do you bring that up, or like, hey, we didn't have this when we went here, we
Oh,
played?
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes. It was like Shoney's buffets and on the, you know, whatever you could hit on the road. And yeah.
What part of the UCF now that exists you wish you had when you played?
I don't know. I'm into the nutrition part of it. I
I
think that's
figured.
really neat. Yeah, for me, that how all that, and you know, when they work out and then they've got their smoothies ready, or you know, whatever it is, I think that piece is amazing. We did not have anything like that. So straight
See
to the
this
cup.
See,
Yeah.
this sounds like me and Don. You know, like Don's like, I got to get going. I got to get to the bounce house and avoid traffic. I'm like, dude, that's easy compared to like when I started went to school. We had to go to the Citrus Bowl to watch games in
Right.
downtown. Like, which is like,
Right.
you know, and it's a big stadium, and we're like 15, 20,000 people are like raising keys. Like, and Don has no idea about this, and Bryson's another one. They're like foreign concept to them. Like,
And
it's gonna
we would try and sneak down to the Citrus Bowl because we would have a match later that night.
yes.
And then our coach did not want us going to the football game and baking in the sun or whatever it was before the match, but we would sneak down there and go to the football game and then run back for our match. And yeah, it was fun.
Right, you couldn't do that. Like, it's funny now. In recent years, there'd be volleyball matches going on, maybe before a football game or stuff like that, or the night before, which has become their big thing they like to do. And you could do
Hmm.
both. Whereas, yeah, right back then, that's impossible because you would have to go
Yeah,
all the way to the Citrus Bowl. They go all the way back.
right.
You know, same thing with baseball with Chad. I've talked to Chad about it. Like, there was no John Giuliano Park or Jay Bergman Field. They had to play
No.
at all these various places.
Yeah, I know. It was, you know, we loved it as much as the kids love their, you know, facilities today. So I guess it's all relative.
See, Don, you got it spoiled.
Yeah, yeah, I guess I do. I guess I do. I was wondering, Emily, so obviously you had such a vast difference in resources and all these different things, but you were able to achieve a level of greatness to where your record still stands still in time. What does that mean to you? And also, how excited are you to watch UCF volleyball moving forward, and how involved do you hope to be in any capacity?
Yeah, it's really my records are just a true testament to the great teammates I had, and you know, like I said, I've already named them all off. Just a really special group of girls that is still, you know, as close today as we were when we played. As far as UCF going forward, I renewed my season tickets this morning. I still love going out to games, especially I had the opportunity to meet the new coach this season, and I'm excited for that new staff. It seems like a really great group of people. So I'm excited to see, you know, where the program is going to head under their leadership.
Yeah, that's a pretty good atmosphere too there at the venue
Oh
there.
yeah,
You mentioned there.
it's
Uh,
great.
I know Miriam's enjoyed it when she's been back. Describe the player that she was, because she's another one that I like you. That's one of the greats that I think has kind of gone under maybe under the radar as you get more accolades. Her numbers are way up there. The only reason she doesn't have more records is because McKenna Melville broke most of them.
Right.
But what kind of player was she? Because obviously you two, and I would imagine you two had a chemistry on the court and made you both each other better.
Miriam she's one of those McKenna Melville type players. Like they have that intangible, like there's a spark within them, a competitive drive, the energy, like you know, you were never not getting up for a game if Miriam's out on the court with you. So, and like speaking to that, you know, unspoken language, you just had to like make eye contact and you almost knew like what she wanted, you know, if it was a specific set or whatever it was. And yeah, Miriam was one of the best, you know, and then she got to, you know, after she was done playing, coach the team as well. And and she still coaches down in South Florida to this day and loves the game. She'll come and meet, her and her son will come and watch my daughter play now and talk about giving advice. Miriam doesn't, she doesn't stand back, which I kind of love actually. She gives Elle, she'll like tell her exactly what's going on. So it's really great. No, Miriam's one of a kind, very special person.
Yeah, I know she tries to come back for a football game and a volleyball at the same time, and I think you two try
She
to
does.
reconnect that way as well and
Oh
meet
yeah.
up during that time. My last couple questions: how would you describe you as a player? And now that you've watched your daughter as she develops as a player, what are some aspects that she has you wish you had as a player?
She just has a higher volleyball IQ than I did. Like I thought I knew a lot, but she really studies the game. There were times a few years back when I would ask her to put her iPad away before I'm like, put it away, it's time for bed. And she's like, but mom, I'm watching the team we're playing tomorrow. And I was like, really? I couldn't believe it. So I was like, okay, keep watching. But I think that's the detail maybe that I was missing. The competitiveness, the the teammates, like we had all the pieces, but her IQ of just the overall game is off the charts.
The film, that's right, video
Uh,
now. You got so
yeah,
much studying video now. Players can get it on their phones. You didn't have that access.
you're
How did
right. You're
I?
right. You're right.
I've told coaches like how did you all like have scouting reports back then? You know what I mean? Like it's always wild.
We would just get their stat sheets from like their
Yeah,
prior
that's
games
it.
or something
Old
like that.
school.
Yeah,
It's old school.
right.
Just old school.
Yeah.
It's old school. Don, do you have any last questions for Emily?
I think I'm good. I really appreciate your time. This was awesome to talk to you and get a lot of good insight. Like I said, the college landscape has changed so much. I mean, especially nowadays. And so it's cool to see like a family entrench a legacy at one university. And so thank you again. You provided us a lot of great info.
Yes,
Yeah.
one of the best UCF athletics families. Really, you can think about it with you and Chad, and now with your son here, and your daughter's going to be in the same conference. It's a pretty awesome, and we appreciate you sharing your story, and hopefully, I know you got a lot of fun days ahead with enjoying this. So thanks for taking the time for talking to us, Emily.
Yeah. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Eric. Yeah. Very, very special times at UCF for sure.
And thanks again to Emily for joining us here on Night Shift. Thanks to Don, who and as well. Look for Don. He's going to have more on the Mottola family in the future on blackandgoldbanneret.com. All right, Bryson, you were not in there for the interview, but you're quite aware of her. In fact, you interviewed about a year ago or so her former teammate, Miriam Metzkis, who we talked about in the interview itself, about that 1-2 tandem from that mid-90s that was part of that dynastic run for UCF volleyball for the from the 90s where they won 6 straight conference championships. And I think you and I both believe that when you think about some of the UCF athletes that have been overlooked over the years in its history, Emily and Miriam are at the top of the list. Baffling that neither one is in the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame. That is a massive oversight. It's an understatement of a word. But nonetheless, fascinating. Let's talk about her volleyball career. This is when you look at the greatest setters all time. Jenny Frank is in the Hall of Fame for UCF, was part of the 2000s to 2003 team that won all those championships. Most recently, the one that people bring up, and certainly even Emily brought up, was Amber Olsen and the great career that she had. But to me, Emily is right there and has a case to be the greatest setter in UCF volleyball history, Bryce.
Oh, absolutely. And even when you think of the 90s, you think of Renata Menchikova and Tyra Harper, who were a major part of that mid-90s era of UCF. But Metzkis and Emily Kaiser, as she was known back then, they were really that genesis of that 90s run, where in that early part of the 90s, from 1991 to 1994, where they really were that 1-2 punch. I like punch. You have Metzkis, who leads the program in history and service aces. Kaiser, though, absolute mile away in terms of career assists. Jenny Frank, like you said, Hall of Fame setter, 4,825 assists over her career. Emily Kaiser finished her career with 5,923, over 1,000 more sets than the Hall of Famer. and she is not in the Hall of Fame herself. Oh yeah, and she's also top 10 in program history in career digs as well.
One player of the year in the conference, which for a setter is very difficult to win that award. Usually outside hitters, for the most part, win that award. I mean, it's kind of like a running back or a receiver winning a MVP, for example, in football. It's not common. So that's the angle there. And I hope she gets into the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame at some point down the road, both of them, her and Miriam, because that's part of, I think, a big glitch missing there in the Hall of Fame class. But what's interesting, too, here, Bryson, and I don't want to give too much away because I know Don is working on a big feature on the family, but you could make the case that Chad and Emily, and now with her son, Luke, who is obviously redshirted this year with UCF baseball, the daughter who's not going to play volleyball at UCF, but she's going to play out west there at Arizona State in about a year from now. That's like a royal family of UCF athletics, isn't it? When Chad Mottola himself arguably is in the conversation among the greatest UCF baseball players, and certainly he's had a great pro career as a coach, the hitting coach with the Tampa Bay Rays, has him once again in the mix for the playoffs here as they get going in the second half of this MLB season. But that's a pretty rich family, that a historic family, the Mottolas to UCF is as far as royalty is concerned, as far as a great athlete, baseball player, and a great volleyball player, married. And now we'll see what happens with Luke and his career moving forward. But nonetheless, that's pretty good. That's hard to top.
I think the only UCF power couple that could topple them is Afia Charles and Torian Wilson. I think they're the only couple.
That's a good, yeah, I agree. For those that don't know, Afia Charles, Hall of Famer herself from track and field at UCF, participated in the Olympics. She was got inducted to the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame a couple of years ago. First track athlete to ever get inducted to the Hall of Fame. And of course, Torian Wilson, former offensive lineman at football for UCF, part of a good run there that he had.
That being said, though, I think that in terms of talent level on the field, Chad Mottola and Emily Mottola now, both definitely, I think, have the win there. And I think both of them deserve to be in the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame and provide a really good foundation for their children who are now college athletes themselves. I don't want to put a lot of expectations on them. I almost feel a little bit hesitant to use the royal family thing right now, if only because Luke has only just started out his college baseball career. He redshirted his first year. And then, of course, you have the daughter who is off at Arizona State right now. However, of course, given what the transfer portal is right now, you never know. She could end up at UCF later down the line anyway. But for right now, I feel like the expectations of it are a little bit high. But if there ever was a case for one, this is it.
Another family of note to bring up is the Gooch family, with Linda Gooch, obviously the cheerleading head coach in the Hall of Fame. Her husband, Alan Gooch, played at UCF football, was on the staff for a long time on the football staff, was the interim coach in 2003. He's in the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame. He's now running the Cure Bowl there. That's another power couple. I guess you can make an argument from a UCF tie standpoint, both having gone to UCF. Being the big picture. Those are the ones I can think of there, Bryce.
Yes, I agree with that. I just think in terms of athletic achievement, I think the Mottolas are the ones that have people.
Agreed. And like I said, we both agree if it was up to us, she should be. And we're not just saying that because we just interviewed her. We've been saying this now, 3-4 years?
It's been a long time, I think. Ever since
2022. I think I even mentioned it in the interview when I was calling UCF volleyball in 2022 and McKenna Melville was breaking all the records. That's when we both started figuring out, wait a minute, who's this Miriam Metzges? And then we're like, Emily Kaiser. They're all over the record books.
Yeah, it is quite insane to me, honestly, that they have been passed over. And we've talked, heck, both of them were actually given USA Volleyball national team trials, both Metzges and Kaiser in the same year. You know who else got that opportunity? Tyra Harper in 1998. So it's unfortunate with how the Hall of Fame kind of worked for a while that some players like that in the early 90s era were getting passed over. But to the Hall of Fame's credit, they have been going back and starting to rectify a few of these things now. Mark Giacone for instance, finally got into the Hall of Fame after waiting an extremely long time for him to get his opportunity. So I think their time could definitely be coming now that the Hall of Fame is much more consistent. But obviously, everyone needs to have their case made for this type of situation. And we've just been kind of making that case for Metzkis and Kaiser over these last couple of years.
Well, it should be interesting. Of course, you mentioned Luke. He's playing summer ball up there in the Midwest. He'll be a part of UCF baseball next year. When we come back, we're going to take an early look ahead to next year's UCF baseball team. Bryson's going to break down some of the players that got drafted this week and the impact it will have on the UCF roster going into next year. An early look on UCF baseball 2026 plus, as well as Bryson's got some questions for me as far as UCF softball is concerned with some of the new additions they've added going into their 2026 season. You're listening to the episode number 501 of Night Shift. All right, welcome back to this edition of Night Shift. Eric Lopez along with Bryson Turner. All right, the MLB draft took place on Sunday night and Monday night, 2-day event. How many rounds, Bryson?
20
rounds, not as long as it used to be, where it took a lengthy week. And this is always a pivotal week for college baseball as well as Major League Baseball. Of course, the All-Star break going on in Atlanta and everything like that, because this is where a lot of college teams usually find out of guys that they're maybe recruiting that end up getting drafted high and decide to skip college and go to play pro, or guys they have on their roster that end up getting drafted, and depending where they get drafted, may decide to leave or stay. No different with UCF. Bryson, what stood out to you here? How did UCF do from an MLB draft standpoint? A handful of players ended up getting drafted, headlined by Jimenez, who went, third round, which is pretty high rank there, and not a surprise. We'll break it down, but you're kind of break down the MLB draft from a UCF standpoint.
Yes, so this was actually the most UCF baseball players to go in one draft since 2018. So it has been a hot minute since this many Knights were drafted. There were 5 overall that men highlighted, as you mentioned, by Antonio Jimenez. He is actually the highest draft pick since, I believe, Eric Skoglund was when he went to the Kansas City Royals.
Really, that high? Higher than he was higher drafted than Freeland.
He was actually drafted only about a couple of 3 picks earlier than Freeland. Only 3 picks earlier. Okay. In terms of overall picks, it's just 3 picks earlier. He is the highest since Eric Skoglund in 2011. He becomes the 11th Knight in program history to go in the top 3 rounds, in fact. So very well done by Antonio Jimenez. It was a great get in the transfer portal by Rich Wallace right there. One of the better hitters on this baseball team that certainly had its issues hitting this year in terms of getting runs across him, and Jimenez did quite the good job at that. So what does that mean for shortstop? Well, it's basically what UCF has had to do with shortstop over these last several years, where they got to get a new one yet again. So it is essentially situation normal on that front there. Other players that went in the draft for UCF. Edion Espinal went in the 10th round to the Detroit Tigers. He's normally been playing second base. He was a junior this year, so that is probably an unexpected departure in some ways. He came here from Chipola, which Chipola is known for creating MLB athletes, so not a surprise that he gets drafted there, but that means second base is more than likely than not going to open up. We do have Breeden Calise that can fill that role, either that or third base. I'll get to third base later. But as far as infield goes, luckily, Rich Wallace has assembled quite the deep infielder group to make up for that. Alex Galvan went in the 13th round to the Arizona Diamondbacks. He was a senior, so he was going to be leaving anyway, so nothing much to report on that front. He's still leaving as he was before. Same is the case for Dylan King, who went in the 17th round to the Cincinnati Reds. Catcher is the position he's playing with there, and UCF has, even though Dylan King leaving was already going to happen, catcher is going to be something that is going to need to be rebuilt by Rich Wallace, because quite a few of them are leaving. Aris Rivera, I believe, ended up leaving in the transfer portal, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe not. Yeah, he did. He left in the transfer portal, so we have to rebuild there. They got Mason Wilson coming in from Rollins already, and Zach Skinner coming in from Lamar, who plays catcher and third base. So that could be an interesting little flexible opportunity there for Coach Wallace. Angelo Smith went in the 18th round to the Los Angeles Angels. He was the last night drafted in the MLB draft. The Angels, quite a popular destination for UCF Knights. He's the 11th Knight to get drafted by the LA Angels in program history. Quite interesting how many of them end up there. And he was a junior, so this was definitely a case where he could have come back had he wanted to. But again, pitching was not exactly UCF's strong suit last season. So the MLB scouts clearly liked his talent, though, but that just leaves another roster spot for Rich Wallace to fill. Kendry Maduro, by the way, also signed with the Angels as an undrafted free agent. Maduro was already in the transfer portal at this point, so he was also going to be leaving anyway. But now that he has been signed by the LA Angels, he technically counts as a UCF Knight that entered the MLB. So as far as changes goes, the only unexpected ones are really in the middle infield, and luckily that's one of the deeper position groups that Rich Wallace has dealt with.
Well, and I don't know how unexpected it was, because I remember Rich Wallace talked about it at the end of the season when the season ended after the regular season finale, and he's done interviews since then. He definitely mentioned the possibility that this could happen where Jimenez and Espinal could get drafted high. And that was a concern, especially Jimenez. And then once you got the hint with Jimenez, once the word started coming out of the combine, MLB's combine, that he just was crushing it, then you knew that, okay, this guy's going to get drafted very high. For those that don't know, MLB's combine that they're doing is kind of like the NFL scouting, NFL combine, very similar. He passed all the tests and then some. He was fantastic in it. So I wasn't surprised that Jimenez got drafted as high as he did, because he had a really good combine there to get the word out there. So, but, we kind of figured middle infield, UCF now will certainly have some work to do there.
Oh, yeah. What I mean unexpected, I mean in terms of like their timing. Like, for example, Antonio Jimenez was a sophomore, so technically you don't expect a sophomore to leave unless a pro situation situations like this happen. I'm talking more about from that perspective. Fun fact, by the way, UCF Hall of Famer Drew Butera was drafted by the New York Mets. When he was selected, he ended up getting traded to the Minnesota Twins. So New York Mets drafted. UCF Knight drafted by Mets do quite a good job there. So good luck with him in that organization.
All right. So now that we know who's leaving and we know who got drafted, what does it look like for the forecast for UCF 2026? What kind of early, granted, very early outlook for this roster? There will be a freshman class that will come in. They've added some faces through the portal. There are going to be some questions, positions. What's your quick thoughts here now? As baseball, obviously now in the summertime, now that the draft's over, there'll be some late ads, maybe add some tweaks, and then before you know it, fall ball will begin. So where do we go from here if you're Rich Wallace and UCF baseball?
Well, with I think that the pitching needs to have almost a complete revamp at this point. Pitching was very much a dud last season for the most part. I think Alex Galvan, funnily enough, was probably one of the only bright spots there. So that's something that they're definitely going to need to figure out right there. I think from a fielding standpoint, I actually think that you still have some pretty solid people coming back, especially in the outfield. You have Diamez Ross and Andrew Williamson. Both were major bright spots offensively over the course of this season. So you talk about Luke Mottola, by the way. Luke Mottola is an outfielder. So that's what he's listed as on the depth chart. So he is definitely going to have a bit of an uphill battle, because in addition to Ross and Williamson, Rich Wallace has brought in John Smith III from South Alabama in the transfer portal. He's started 49 games, hit .314. J.D. Rogers is also coming in for his last year of eligibility from Vanderbilt. We know how lauded Vanderbilt is from a college baseball standpoint. And so it's still going to be, I think, a crowded outfield for UCF there. And Luke Mottola is still young. He redshirted this year, so that means he still has 4 years of eligibility. There's still plenty of time for Mottola to develop behind, I would say, some very talented outfielders. So I wouldn't expect Mottola to really break out yet unless he has a really, really good fall ball. And we've seen some UCF Knights have a really good fall ball and end up playing a role later. See Andrew Sundin, who of course was a senior this year as UCF tries to rebuild at catcher, which I alluded to a little bit earlier. Elsewhere in the infield, Landon Moran transferred in to UCF from Stetson for his senior year. He'll likely inherit the first base role. Javier Crespo is also arrived from FIU as well as an infielder, I think. So that will also be he'll probably end up factoring in somewhere. I have to double check what position he was. I think he was on the left side of the field, either shortstop or third base, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong on that. But I think Rich Wallace very much has a plan in terms of the fielding, because at least he has something to build from there in terms of that, and also offense, since Andrew Williamson is now looking like he's going to come back, and he was probably the best player on that team last year. It's the pitching that is going to need to have a complete revamp. And so far, Rich Wallace, I'm thinking football right now, has already brought in plenty of pitchers from the transfer portal, highlighted by a second-team all-region selection out of D2. So there's definitely, and Matthew Hale as well from Stetson from a relieving standpoint.
Well,
so
a couple of hatters added on the player side, and of course he added a coach from Stetson coming over, taking over for Ted Tom moving on now at Memphis. So a move on the coaching there that'll be new come this fall.
Yes, it was a striking move to me, just because pitching was the area where UCF probably had a lot to be desired last year. But Drew Thomas, he got to a College World Series, and sometimes with pitchers, sometimes you just miss, and that last year was a miss. I think Ted Tom getting an opportunity with Memphis was great to see, and Stetson. Stetson's a great baseball program for a reason. So if you have to go and replace a guy like Ted Tom, who was kept by Rich Wallace originally for a reason, then going to Stetson is certainly a solid place to get your next guy from.
No doubt. So that's the story with baseball. Obviously, we'll have more on them once they get fall ball going. So it usually gets going around October. Certainly if all the moves you can check out at the transfer portal that we have. We have a transfer tracker, we call it, here on blackandgoldbanneret.com. It's a very popular place that people like to go to our site, which we are very much appreciative. And I know there was a lot of softball fans there. We're certainly appreciative of that as well.
Absolutely. A little sneak peek for what I'm at next. Men's soccer has finally started to reveal some of their transfer additions. So be sure to check out the transfer portal tracker, because more than likely you're going to see some new additions into it for the men's soccer crowd.
No doubt. All right, Bryce. So let's wrap it up with softball. Softball added some new faces. I know you've been waiting to ask me about them. So break down what softball has added, and then fire away with any questions you've got. And then we could kind of discuss the softball team, obviously coming off that successful year, 35 wins, a regional final, first regional final since 2022. Hint, that's why they're nominated in a lot of the Banny Awards categories, if you've noticed, by the way. That's why, which you can check out at blackandgoldbanneret.com. But I will give you the microphone here to kind of take the lead on this one.
Well, let's go ahead and start with somebody we already knew was on the roster at this point when the transfer portal window opened, and that is Destiny Washington. She was in the dugout last year for UCF softball, but she had to sit out due to transfer rules. I went ahead and left her on the transfer portal tracker just because people might not remember that she was already here, but she was a transfer. It's just, she had to sit out because of rules. So tell us about what you saw, because I don't know if you had a chance to interact with Destiny all that much, but what did you learn about her just kind of watching her in the dugout this season?
A little bit. I mean, she traveled with them and she was around the team, obviously, helped out in practice and stuff like that, I would assume. I'm an outfielder. You mentioned they picked her up, I think it was after the fall semester. There was that fall portal window that opened, and she entered the portal, coming from Marshall, and then they got her. Now, obviously, she wasn't eligible to play. That's why she sat out. but I don't think Coach Ball Malone mind that as much. Get her a chance to be around the program and develop. I expect her to be in the mix in what I think is going to be a fascinating outfield battle in fall ball with softball. It's one of the most, I've been going to fall ball at UCF for softball since 2008. And this might be one of the most fascinating positions that I can remember looking at as far as who's going to be playing the outfield, because as we learned throughout this offseason here over the last month or two, Bryson, Washington will not be the only new face you'll see in the outfield.
Yes, there are a grand total of 4 outfielders, counting Destiny Washington, that will be new to the team just from a transfer portal perspective in 2026. Here are the other ones. First, we have Zoe Calvez, who is a sophomore coming from LSU. She mainly served as a pinch runner for 7 games in 2025. Callista Birkenstock, who is also going to be a sophomore coming from Florida Gulf Coast. She played in 41 games and stole 23 bags in 2025, so she was mostly a pinch runner. And then you have Carly Penner from Kent State. She is coming to UCF for her final year of college eligibility. She hit in 52 games, even pitched in 17 as well. So she's a two-way player there. Not hit for a 205 average, but she also has quite the speed on her as well. So I would say Coach Ball Malone has quite the outfield battle on her hands. But even if whoever loses in this situation, I think there's going to be a very solid role for any of these players as pinch runners, as that's kind of where Coach Ball Malone actually lost some people in the portal this offseason.
Well, I think what you see there with the names, all those names you mentioned, including Washington, let's add Washington to that mix that you just mentioned. What they all have in common is they're all fast. And I think Coach Ball Malone didn't like this, the last couple of years. I don't think she was thrilled with the speed that she had on the roster and the base running. I think she wants to be much more aggressive on the base pads, much more attacking. If you remember, Bryson, for example, let's go back to like 2021, 2022 for say, when you had a healthy Kennedy Cersei would steal some bases for you. Katie Burge could steal some bases. Elise Volpe could steal some bases back in those teams and play some small ball. I don't think that's been at the level that coaches would have liked over the last couple of years. And I think they've addressed that here from a speed standpoint. And I think also, I think there's going to be some spots. Obviously, Stormy Kotzelnick graduated, is playing professionally, and right now with the Monarchs here in the backyard in Orlando. You had Madison Simon graduate. So the only outfielder that you have returning that started consistently is Samantha Ray. And so now you have Ray added with all these new faces that you mentioned. You have somebody like Izzy Mertez that played some at right field, but that's not her natural position. I don't know if that's something they will continue. They've also, from what I understand, have a couple of other outfield athletes coming in from this freshman class that's very strong in the fall that's coming in. So I think it's going to be wide open in the fall. I'm intrigued to see all the different combinations that we're going to see, because for people that have never been to a fall ball, the fun thing about it, from my standpoint anyway, is this is the time where people will experiment with players in different lineups and different positions, because you never know. If you have an injury come spring, you need somebody ready to go. So I expect a lot of different combos in the outfield. I will bring up a couple of notes here. Zoe is the one name I'm going to really intrigued to watch. You mentioned she didn't get to play much at LSU. LSU went heavy portal in the outfield a year ago. So they went with a more veteran approach in the outfield. So she didn't really have an opportunity to play. This is a kid that, if you're into recruiting in softball, she's a 4 or 5-star recruit. She's from our backyard, Bryson. I believe she went to from high school here, backyard. Was a 2-sport star athlete, played softball and basketball. In fact, she led her high school in scoring. So I don't know, Bryson, if UCF women's basketball needs some scoring, maybe Coach Messer can talk to Coach Ball Malone. Maybe they could work something out for maybe she could help him out in the basketball court, kind of like UCLA. I don't know if you saw the news. UCLA, Megan Grant, a superstar softball player for UCLA, is going to play basketball this upcoming year and join that UCLA team. So I'm excited to see Zoe Calvez. That's a kid that is super fast. Would not surprise me if she wins one of those outfield jobs. Would not surprise me if she's a leadoff hitter or a 9 hitter. And she's got 3+ years of eligibility, and she's back home in the region here in Central Florida. So I think that's one to watch. You mentioned Penner, by the way. The numbers at Kent State doesn't maybe stand out to you. This summer, she played at the Florida Collegiate Summer League, led the league in stolen bases in the Florida Collegiate Summer League. So, and I think you bring up an interesting point. I don't know who's going to start, but I think this team is going to try to steal more bases next year. And I also think even if any of these outfielders are not starting, I think they're going to be a weapon out of the dugout and use them as a pinch runners, which I don't think UCF, again, was as thrilled with the last couple. That's something, again, Coach Ball Malone, when she got here, always referred to her bench as the All-American bench. She likes to have players on the bench have specific roles. I'll give you an example, Bryson. Kendall Yarnell was their weapon off the bench from a pinch hitting standpoint, right? Every time that was her role, and she excelled in it, led the team, the Big 12, in pinch hit base hits. Certainly had that big pinch hit home run up in Lawrence against Kansas and things like that. She would like to have roles. Even if you're not a starter, you're going to have a role on this team. And I think she wants to add depth and speed. And like I said, I think she's done that. I think this will be a faster UCF team. And it'll be interesting, too, from an outfield defensive standpoint. They should be able to garner more range as a result. Remember early last year, Bryce, a couple times there were some balls they couldn't get to, or sometimes the outfielders would just they weren't confident in the other outfielder getting into it, and they kind of bumped into each other. I think they want to clean some things up defensively in the outfield. So I think that it kind of explains some of those outfield additions that you referenced there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that speed point is absolutely important as well. I remember this past softball season where passing the bat was extremely important, just because usually UCF would score in a lot of big bursts. Like, there really wasn't like that very what's the best way? They didn't really get like 1 run per inning type, or 1 or 2 runs, unless it was a home run. You usually don't see that. When UCF scores a lot, it's usually with bursts of activity at certain points in the game. Heck, I remember a lot of the comeback attempts that we saw that both succeeded and failed with certain rally situations.
You know where that got exposed? Remember early in the year when the offense struggled, we're all like kind of shaking our head like, oh boy, what's going on? It's a young offense. You know, sometimes when you're struggling, you're going to struggle hitting. You're going to go through slumps, but they didn't have the speed to kind of manufacture runs. And
yeah,
I think that's something that Coach Ball Malone wants to get back to, as well as Noah Sanders, who, remember, is running the offense, comes from a baseball background. That is a very similar approach. You know, you've noticed now over the last couple of years in Major League Baseball, they're getting back to base running and stealing bases more so than ever before, especially with the shift kind of being eliminated in the pro ball stamp. And I think it's been the same case in college baseball. So that's, I think, a big factor in all that. And we'll see how that materializes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Manufacturing runs, extremely important. I'm excited to see what softball can do on that front. One last transfer to talk about from softball, and that is in the infield. Onika Spencer is coming to Orlando from Tennessee State. She started in 43 of the 45 games she played in last year, hit for .331 average, 9 home runs, .419 on base percentage, and 33 RBIs. I'll tell you what, Kyle or Eric, with Kylie Straught I've got my names mixed up. With Kylie Straught going into the transfer portal, you knew that Cindy Ball Malone had to bring in another catcher to back up Beth Damon, and you can't really do much better, I think, than getting a player like Onika Spencer in that light.
I agree. That was once you saw the news with Kylie moving on, and I'm going to miss Kylie, certainly. I mean, certainly her and Alexis Morgan, for example. Interestingly, both end up going to schools in the American Athletic Conference. Alexis Morgan will be at East Carolina. Kylie just went on to South Florida where she will still get to stay home, closer to home, and things like that. So we wish them both the best on that.
Deanna Cunningham's actually going to Memphis.
Yeah, which is funny because Trina Prater's the head coach there, a former UCF assistant. Cassidy Brewer's on her director of staff, also is there. So there's a lot of UCF ties there in Memphis, which is kind of funny, very unique there. But so obviously with Strott, I think Kylie, and again, this is where I totally understand where they're coming from. You got Beth Damon, who had a great freshman year, is probably going to come in as the projected starter. Kylie was a great receiver as a defensive catcher. Outside of the game that you covered in DeLand, which she has a nomination for on the Bannies, she really didn't hit, which is what makes one of the million things that makes that Stetson game the most hilarious game ever. But I think she fits well, actually, South Florida there. Ken Erickson's big on the defensive catching there, and we'll see if she gets opportunities there. Josie Foreman, their star catcher, graduated. But this is a fascinating pickup. A multi-time conference performer, has some pop in her bat. You could say, well, look at the conference and the competition that she's playing, but either you hit or you don't hit. So I'm intrigued to see her. To see not only is she like obviously a backup there to Beth Damon, but could she be somebody that they could go to maybe get some extra at-bats, maybe give Beth Damon some time off, maybe play her little DP, or maybe be a pinch hitter. I think she's going to have a role on this team. So I'll be curious to see her in the fall. We don't know, obviously, we don't have a ton of highlights, obviously, of her because of where she played at Tennessee, but her receiving purposes.
Tennessee State, not Tennessee.
Correct. Tennessee State. What kind of defensive catcher is she? And she's going to work. I'm sure that'll be part of the process in the fall as she gets to get familiar with the pitchers and how that developed, because she clearly can hit a little bit. Can she be a good defensive catcher they can rely on will be interesting. But I was intrigued by that addition there for sure.
One interesting combination that I think could be interesting is Spencer also has a good amount of experience playing third base. I don't know if that reminds you of anybody, Eric Lopez.
Yeah, we had one that played here at the third and catch recently in Jada Cody. Not suggesting she's Jada Cody, but you bring up an interesting point, and that's one of the things Coach Bo Malone likes is players that have versatility. I think you have that with the outfielders they've picked up, and you have it here with Spencer, who knows, could be somebody you need to maybe play a backup third base for Humphreys or things like that. So if that's a direction they like to go to. So that's what the beauty of the fall ball will be.
Well, or like you said, what if you want to have somebody else as a DP? Say you want to have Sierra Humphreys get a bit of a break from fielding and have her DP for a game or something like that. Essentially, where DP is more of a rotating cast of characters,
right,
instead of a solid player that just hits every game. Versatility, like you said.
And I think this team should be deeper than it was last year, certainly more experienced. Remember, this was a young team last year. We had a million questions. I mean, we're not even discussing the freshman class that's coming in. A kid like Hildy Dempsey, who's a two-way star player, was top 35 ranked player. If you follow recruiting, that's a name to watch. It'll be interesting to see where she fits in there. And then the other name to watch, and she was playing as well in this Florida Collegiate Summer League and really had a good summer. That, from what I've heard, is a tremendous bat, is Kendall Trim. Kendall Trim out of Moody, Alabama, highly touted bat, one of the best bats coming out of high school. Plays first base, which is a stacked position, but I've heard she has a very special bat. Where do you find her? At bats for her will be interesting. How many of these freshmen redshirt versus playing will be interesting in this fall? Because if you look quickly, and a couple things that really have stood out to me, Bryson, I don't know if you've noticed, but both Rich Wallace and Cindy Bo Malone are very similar as far as grabbing players in the portal from under the radar. Not big name players, but usually maybe in small schools, or maybe if they were at a big school, didn't get the opportunities. Very similar philosophies there as far as evaluating talent and bringing them in to develop, I think is interesting. And I don't think it's an accident if there's parallels there, because in the transfer portal, from talking to a lot of people for softball, and I'm sure it's the same for baseball, it is expensive to get, for example, big-time power bats. It is expensive to get power arms. So you've got to be creative if you don't have if you're not Texas Tech, for example, or some of the SEC schools in these programs in baseball and softball. And let's be real, we've discussed this at length about UCF and what they have and don't have. And I think being creative is part of that process for UCF. And that's, like I said, I think too, in Coach Baumel, I'm not going to speak on Rich's case. You kind of discussed their roster, but from a Cindy's case, they're banking on that power coming from the players that obviously Trim could be one, but think about who's coming back. All right, let me go by position. Beth Damon comes back at catcher, 8 home runs last year. I think they're expecting similar production power-wise. You got Ashley Griffin for her senior year, first base, coming back, has some pop. You've got Aubrey Evans, who had a monster year power-wise, led the team in homers. She'll be back at shortstop. Sierra Humphreys, not really more of a line drive hitter, but still has power where she can hit a bunch of doubles and things like that. She'll be back at third base. You have
how about Izzy Mertez?
Mertez, who has power, either playing the DP spot, which she did most of last year, could play first base, can play a little right field. So you're right. So I think those players, not to mention, I think Kendall Yarnell, another year under her belt, has some pop. You just got to find a way to play her. We'll see what happens there. But I think they're going to depend on those players to provide the power with maybe a Trim or one of these other freshmen. And then you add speed, which you can get, and some of these players in a very efficient move there. So I think that's why the roster looks like. We haven't even discussed second base, where they do return Coco Jaimes, who I just coming off that insane regional that she had.
I'll tell you what, if she can keep up that offensive momentum from the NCAA regional, then there genuinely will not be a weak spot on that lineup ever.
Well, and I know they were depending on that for her to be that kind of type of player. She just got off to a bad, remember, she was a freshman. And I think one of those things, when you get off to a bad start, it kind of digs itself, as a whole. But give her credit, over the last few weeks, even prior to the regional, there were signs she was coming out of it. She had a good end of the regular season and even had a pretty good Big 12 tournament. And then, my goodness, that regional was unbelievable. It's one of the best regionals that I've seen from a UCF position player in all my years covering. It was and that's the potential that she has. She was a highly touted mid infielder. So you're right, it's in there. And if she can continue that momentum into her sophomore year with that confidence, you're right. Because you're probably going to have some combination of Griffin, Jaimes, Aubrey, Humphreys, and Damon potentially. Remember, last year you're thinking, I don't know who's back to start. We know Aubrey's going to start, but remember, she was a second baseman the year before that, so she was have to move to short. Now you basically return the entire infield, and then you look at the pitching staff. You have Isa Vega back. You have Lopez back. You've got pretty much your pitching staff back. You do lose Caitlin Felton. That will be the one big pitching question, is who replaces Felton in that role that she really excelled in this year, being that high leverage pitcher who could start but also close games out. We'll see what they come up with. But all things considered, Bryson, I think this was a successful offseason for softball, not just because of who they added and all that stuff, but who they kept. Because, I remember towards the end of the postseason, and I'm like, man, this is a bright future. And then like Kyle Nash was like, well, yeah, but aren't you worried who's going to poach, player? Because I think a lot of UCF fans still are very, and understandably so, wary because of what happened with the basketball programs and everything. But you made a great point to him. And I want you to, I don't know if you remember what you said, but you talked about you weren't as concerned because of the culture that Coach Paul Malone has built there at softball.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think for one thing, softball has become very great from a cultural standpoint. There's also the fact that money is a little less of an issue in softball than it is in basketball, at least from a per player basis. And I always say what you can make up for, if you don't have the money, you can make up for it in that culture. Like, you have to make playing for you so good that you would give up the money. And that is what I think Coach Ball Malone has been able to do so far, because of just exactly what you said. Because Coach Ball Malone has been able to develop players into, I would argue, the best versions of themselves, and they get a chance to start and get a chance to play for the most part here at UCF. They might not be able to get at other major power schools. You talk about the pitching staff, by the way. I'll be very interested to see what Coach Ball Malone does on that front, because that's been a question that we saw before. I think the development of pitchers like Yesenia Lopez and Lena Elkins will be really crucial to what the success of Coach Ball Malone in the next season, because if they don't see improvement off of last year, then they're really going to need that murderer's row of a lineup to make up for it.
Yeah, I think, it's funny you mentioned Lopez. I remember last fall, I was there at fall ball. A case would made. People would, I think, would have agreed in the stand. Lopez had the better fall than did Vega. Now, again, that tells you that not to get carried away with what you see in fall ball. But Lopez was the one that had the better fall. And remember, she had a great first month of the year and then ran into some things. And remember, she's just a freshman. I'm very confident that she'll bounce back and be much better and form a 1-2 punch with her and Vega. And then Elkins, I think, I know from what I work on some of the mechanic stuff. Second year under the Coach Ball Malone's umbrella, we'll see how that looks. Usually, a second year really helps out a pitcher under Coach Ball Malone, so that they're going to depend on him. To your point, and by the way, I'm confident still in Rich and baseball. I know a lot of people still have this bad taste from this past year and how it ended and missing the Big 12 tournament. You brought it up. They misfired on some of the pitching that didn't pan out. They also had some injuries in the pitching that didn't work out. I actually didn't mind the offense. Yeah, they kind of left some runners on base, but when you don't have the dominant bullpen and you struggle, that sometimes people harp a lot on the offense. I think Rich will take a lot from this past year, and I expect them to bounce back. We'll get to see him in the fall, but I'm intrigued to see him. But I'm optimistic for both programs here moving into next year.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, what essentially happened is that the pendulum just switched the other way. I mean, you had Rich Wallace come in year one and managed to take a team that missed the tournament that year and took them right to a regional final for the first time in a long time. And now the pendulum has just swung back the other way, where that's just what the transfer portal does to stickball. Stickball is the sport, I've always said this, that is the most adept for the transfer portal. And the transfer portal honestly makes it a more active culture in terms of the sport itself, just because it's been around for so long, and that there's much more opportunities to do stuff with, and be great at it, not just from like a smaller college level, but at the major college level as well. So I think Rich Wallace will definitely learn a lot. He's still trying, learning how to be a head coach, and there was some hard lessons that he had to learn in 2024. But his evaluation of talent is still there. He's still brought in Diamez Ross from the portal. So I think you just have to kind of let him get used to things and see what happens next year, and see if he can swing the pendulum back the other way again, more in the direction of 2024.
Lost 6 games, 8th inning or later, that they had a lead in Big 12 games. Think about that. You flip 3 or 4 of those, you're easily in the Big 12 tournament. Maybe you're on the bubble. That's how narrow it is. That's how much the struggle was in the back end of the bullpen. They're going to have to address that from that standpoint. Softball won. Remember, softball was in that boat 2 years ago, Bryce. Remember they lost like 12 games that year by 1 run?
Oh, yeah. I remember that was brought up so much during the following media day. That was, I mean, you look at the comebacks that they even had to do this past season. Chief of all of them, Stetson.
It turned around a little bit this year, like you mentioned, the Stetson game down 11. That was insane, unbelievable. All right, we've gone longer than we planned, so sorry, Kyle. I know Brian Murphy though is listening through and through. So, last question, Bryson. What's a movie this summer that you're going to go see and you're curious for Brian Murphy's opinion on it? Because he's probably going to watch it. Odds are he's going to watch this movie whatever movie you're going to say you want to watch.
I don't want to be basic and just go Superman, because that's just such an obvious choice. I'll go with Elio, which is the new Pixar movie that just came out. I went to see it recently, and it was a pretty good one that not that many people are really giving a chance. So I'll be interested. I'll be a little different than say Elio, but Superman is still Superman.
I think that's the go-to. And let's be real. He's going to go see it. He's going to fit it in at some point around his baseball work, and I use air quotes, covering baseball during this all-star break and everything like that. So he's always good. Always want to give him a shout-out. And I also want to give a shout-out to all of you tuning in. Make sure you tune in to the previous episode. Go to blackandgoldbanneret.com. Vote for the Bannies. Lots of award those categories coming out. Vote. That's all I got to say. Vote. To all the categories and pick out as we wrap up, put a bow tie on the last calendar year, athletic year for UCF before we look ahead to the fall. Also, the quarter century team is out. The offense, defense, special teams, 60-man roster. Our last podcast broke it down in depth. You can read it. I encourage the reading. We got some pretty cool all-deck quarter century and other features coming up over the coming months here at blackandgoldbanneret.com. And, of course, we'll get you set for the upcoming football season when it gets going. We're thinking maybe a couple of weeks away from practice and some media availabilities. It's almost here before you know it. And we'll be covering it here on blackandgoldbanneret.com as well as on KnightShift on the YouTube channel, as well as on all the social media places. Bryson, this has been a pleasure, sir.
Absolutely, it has. Always love talking stickball with the Sultan of Stickball, Eric Lopez.
We'll probably do a fall ball update at some point. We'll sneak it in, even though against Kyle and Jeff's best wishes. That's okay. Thanks to Emily Mottola for joining us. Don, thanks for him in the interview. Thanks to Bryson, who produced and co-hosted the show. I'm Eric Lopez. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Night Shift.